I began my career with the whole aspect of optimizing prices. That is years ago. I worked at a company and we sold fabric. And part of the deal is we'd have a sale Monday on a regular basis. And typically we would receive shipments in the previous week and we prepare for the sales and everything else. And part of it was called flat fold fabric, where literally it's fabric dozens of yards long, all folded nice and neatly and everything. You put it on a 4x4 or 4x8 table, and you put it out there with a sign on it, 298 a yard. And the sharpers would come in on sale Monday morning, and we had them out there, and they would go through all that stuff, and they'd tear apart the table. They'd bring the flat fold fabric over to a cutting table. We would cut it for them, and then we put it back out there. And usually that was Monday. Usually by Wednesday, that table of $2.98 a yard flat full table had been already picked over because the customers chose exactly the coolest cover, the coolest fabric, the best feeling fabric that they wanted at that price. Often it was pretty common for us to go out Thursday morning and change the price, either 229 a yard or 198 a yard, because the cool stuff was already picked over. The customer made the determination what was the cool stuff. And some people looked at it saying, oh, they're going to mark it down later on. And sure enough, we did. So they'd go back out, whether it was Thursday, Friday, or maybe even the following Monday, we'd reprice it down to 198 a yard. They'd come in a flurry, they would buy that left and right, and eventually the table that had been stacked like this with fabric and for 4x8, all kinds of stuff, would shrink down to a 4x4, and it'd only be half the size and everything, and people would still buy it at 198, and it was a good value for them. It was once upon a time, all of it was priced originally at 298, but we had variable pricing based upon when the customer picked it over, when the customers made the decision that this is worth 298 and this isn't. So they would come up by the 198 a yard, and by the next week we look at it again and say, okay, it's time to mark it down. It might take 2 weeks, but we would mark it down again to 129 a yard or 98 cents a yard. Customer would come in, oh, you marked it down, and they called the different clerks to find out what's going on sale and everything else. There was always this aspect of markdowns, 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 creating a certain excitement. And you bury the markdown tables in the back of the store, so you have to walk past all the really cool fabric to get back there. They'd buy it again. And eventually we marked at 298 a yard. It's all exactly the same original shipment. We mark it down to 2 yards for a dollar. And then they would go nuts, and whatever was left over, we pitch in the dumpster by the time we were all done, because it really was ugly looking stuff by the time we we're all done. But it all was $2.98 a yard. It was all worth that based upon our different calculations, but the customers were the final determiners of the actual final price. Part of it is paying attention to what they like in the process, looking at forecasting about initial demand price relationship for the product, learning about observing customers, making buy, no buy decisions, taking that information, creating that aspect and forming a data pool for what the customers like, and then price optimization based on selection of prices for competing stuff. We would get some stuff come in with a recommended price of 298 a yard, and then call the buyer and says, what are you sending us? This is total junk. It will never sell. And sometimes we are wrong, but usually we're right. Or they get something in recommended price for 198 a yard, and it actually be worth more. So we put it out for higher. It would just depend on price optimization. This is not new because we got AI and fancier computers. This is a matter of how you do business in the world of business. You want to get the maximum revenue you can. So it's all about making profit. One of the textbook talks about this company, Rulala, and frankly, it's a pretty interesting company. They have the things they put out for sale, and they have a time period, and they're really interested in trying to maximize revenue off of it. But they also want to give their customers some of the spectacular different items that are available to them, stuff that not everybody has. Well, obviously, when you have less of an item, a lot of times in people's minds, it makes it far more valuable. And if you have something that almost nobody has that is really outstanding, that makes it even more valuable. And that is what this company really does. So, Lula they're not interested in changing prices on what they call a first exposure event. They want to learn from the customer's behavior because that's not an option. So the first time they have this line of clothing or this particular outfit or whatever, they don't want to experiment with it. They want to have a set price. So how do you go about doing that? In essence, you're using different tools, and one of them is robotic automatic processing when it comes down to determining what's involved in the process. And you'll see some of the different things. I thought it was extremely brilliant on their part all the way back several years ago to be using that. Nowadays, this is almost a common occurrence for a lot of different pricing to have a demand prediction model for first exposure. So with that, they're the first ones to really champion this aspect, working with the university to use their computers for this. But it's not the first time, going back multiple decades, when universities would work with different industries, like I did way back a long time ago, in the aspect of trying to maximize revenue, in this case, an auto parts store, trying to make certain that we had exactly what the customers wanted in a timely fashion and try to reduce inventory, because you already know that too much inventory can kill your company. So the two biggest challenges for Rue La La is a matter of estimating the lost sales due to stockouts. If you don't have merchandise, you can't sell it. No merchandise, no sale, no profit. That's how it works. You have to have that. If you're out, you better make certain you have a substitute that same clientele is willing to buy, or they just may go click onto your website and you lose that customer, maybe even forever. Predict demand for styles that has no historical sales data. It's really hard to do that unless you can have some other data of stuff that's related to that. But regardless, that price optimization model can really be very difficult if you've never seen it sold before. So all item event combinations that don't stock out for a while, or those item event combinations that did stock out, those are probably the only way you can sit down and start making determinations as to what you think is going to happen and what your order for that particular product should be in that style. So it's calculated a percent of sales for every hour of the event. You're tracking stuff, think, and you're looking at the data out of it. And if you can, making certain you have other things coming through. If it's the first time event, you have no idea if it's going to go over well or not, but it depends how much you hype, how much you sell, and how much you have advertising that's going to be appealing. But even that's not a guarantee. By the time you're all done, every event item combination that stocks out, okay, identify which curve was appropriate based on the start time. It's tracking data, but it's just going to depend too upon your customer draw for that moment in time. You may have a different customer group on Monday at 10 o'clock than Tuesday at 10 o'clock. It just depends what you have to track the data properly. All researchers want to have consistency, except in the world of retail, you simply don't have that. So the clustering techniques, once you have that, then apply it, then you generate an estimated demand for items that stock out, ready to predict future demands. Regression trees really are one of the best predictors for demand. Regression trees don't act as a linear model. They look totally different. Please read your text on this. This is actually a relatively interesting methodology to make some price optimization predictions as to where you're placing things. And sometimes in price optimization, no matter what happens, you may have a computer sitting there and an AI sitting there. AIs are not all that intelligent. So please don't roll over and say, well, the AI said, okay, sometimes who's ever in charge of that product and that item, and the retail manager, humans a lot of times have a much better instinct, even than data in the process, as to what should be priced and how you do it to make certain it's all gone, or to make certain that you raise the price, you're not stock out, but making a lot of profit in the process. So price optimization, by the time they were all done, using their artificial intelligence out there, the overall impact was a 10% increase in revenue, trying to predict exactly what will you do on the first exposure styles in the process. It really depends upon these things: forecasting, learning, price optimization, and prediction on items never sold before. Take care.